and benefited from the previous failures to deal with the new situation with new approaches, sacrificing many things, putting the dialogue at the forefront. Other side have decided to resist change using all the political and legal, sometimes ethnic reasons, but thank God the road or the path chosen by the Senegalese based on principles and values has come out unvanquished, based on dialogue, respectful of the other, and committed to the results that dialogue gives birth to. The people took dialogue in an easy way, simple but real. The people have chosen the reform based on dialogue, on the basis of science. Those who were for backwardness continued torturing people, but the people resisted and resisted, sacrificing many things to develop the country. And this agenda that Senegal witnessed in 10 years was based on 3 axes: justice in distribution of wealth, governance, good governance, and sovereignty in every field. And this is through the human capital, by educating people, by promoting social justice. Senegal has chosen the road of dialogue and democracy, and this was not for power or authority or taken, but to promote every aspect of life, administrative, legal, or educational. And this was not limited to the national territory, but it has extended itself to other countries, neighboring countries. By way of instance, the relationship between Senegal and Mauritania. 2 brotherly nations with the same history, the same destiny, the same fates, the same nature. In 8 months, the president of Senegal visited Mauritania 3 times in 8 months, as I said. He has also been visited by the president of Mauritania, Mohammed Sheikh Al-Ghazouani, twice in the same period. And this has given vitality to our exchanges, economic, scientific, and social exchange. If this means anything, it means that dialogue is a solution that we cannot do without, and that it's always possible, even if it is difficult, even there are pressures. If you choose to go for dialogue, you need to respect the other opinion. the dialogue doesn't need to be a monologue, because if you are in a monologue you don't succeed, and thank God because of this dialogue we succeeded. I wouldn't close my speech here without extending my thanks to the President of Mauritania, my second country, Mr. Mohammed Al-Ghazwani, President of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. I want to extend my thanks to the people of Mauritania, the people that I know and I grew here. I have eaten your bread, your food, I drank from your tea, and I talked your language and your vernacular. It's a generous, hospitable people who loves the other. I want to thank, by the same token, Sheikh Allama Abdullah bin Bayya, His Eminence, for his patronage and for these wonderful initiatives and for this method adopted by many of the ulama of our ummah. I want to congratulate people from Côte d'Ivoire for their prize, the prize deservedly won by the President Ouattara. And I tell you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. After this speech or this poem, we move to another good speaker of our continent, the President of the Rabita of Ulama of Burkina Faso. I forgot to mention Mr. Kawnakhi from the family of the Sheikh, who is with us. So he said that I forgot to mention him among the delegation of Senegal. Mr. Khana, you have the floor. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin Taha al-Amin, his kin and disciples. May God protect and assist our leaders and teachers. Allow me, sir, and I take the floor and I talk to you because the topic I will to talk about is of paramount importance. Africa is witnessing, like many Islamic countries at this moment, disputes and conflicts full of hatred, language and discourse, radicalism, extremism that has kind of disrupted our union, further to which civil wars saw the light here and there and led to almost disappearance of peace in Muslim countries. And the biggest problem is that what has been said is a problem among Muslims, to the fact we talk today now about takfir, common between one tribe, one group or another. One group may think that the others are kuffar. African countries are involved in this situation where victims die, and Burkina Faso and many African of the Sahel country have witnessed and lived this chaos. ولن يشد الدين أحد إلا غلبه. Sharia came just for the make people live and cohabit together, and the problem that these suggestions are drafted are in the following questions: how can we reinforce and promote peace and put an end to the discourse of hatred that lead to civil war in our African continent? And the answer to this question can be summarized in the following items. The Islamic da'wah has its, or call has its own way. There is no doubt that we need to work so that we could improve our societies. These are summarized in what God said: ادعوا إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن إن ربك أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين. And he's saying about Jesus, لما جاء عيسى بالبينات قال جئتكم بالحكمة لأبين لكم بعد الذي تختلفون فيه فاتقوا الله وأطيعوا إن الله هو ربي وربكم فاعبدوه هذا صراط مستقيم. So if we are using these tools we should use it in promoting the life of Muslims so that they can remember the path of God. Difference in opinions are part of life, and the different issues that we are talking about can be different in opinions.
And the peace can be consolidated only by understanding the word of Allah as a moderate nation without sparing any effort or exceeding in any deed. And if Allah wanted, He could make of us just one nation, and for this the Almighty created people very different, and there is Jahannam for the misdoers. And also meaning from Quranic verses, there are so many teachings in order to stabilize the heart of the Prophet. And if we are required to understand and learn lessons and draw lessons from the lives of people at the universal level, we should be very compassionate with our fellow Muslims. And religion cannot be confined to words, but it is also wisdom that can be applied. Eradicating hate speech and extremism can be attained only by reading the scriptures and also the purposes of Islam in order to understand the underlying meaning for peace, and the lessons that can be learned only by believing in God as unique. And as God said in Quranic verses, those who remained steady on the right path cannot fear anything. And also in hadith conforming to it, the Prophet said, you cannot believe until you love each other. Do you want me to show you what can help you in this regard? They said, yes please, just spread peace among them, and you cannot have access to heaven until you do that. And the disciples asked, can we do that if we have mercy? And the Prophet said we are talking about general mercy. So peace is just spreading peace among Muslims, among themselves, and also with other people. And you all know very clearly that Islam did not attain and reach this continent in a violent way. So we need to correct the misunderstandings concerning our religion, and because of those misunderstandings we had so many civil wars, and the interest of our nation requires understanding the fiqh al-maqasid, the purposes of religion, because this regulates all affairs of people, and so many people can go to doom if they do not understand the purposes of religion. And this is why people fall in the trap of misinterpreting. And here I give you the example of the Israelites' deeds in the absence of Moses, and his brother did not act very wisely in this regard, and we have the lesson even in Quran. And here I can quote the Quranic verse, which means the Almighty is ordering you to follow him. And they said, the people of the Israelites, they said, we cannot move until Moses is back. And then Mamun was asked, can't you see that they are going astray? And when Moses came back and reached out to his brother, and then they started having tensions, only compassion could bring back things to the right track. So whenever there is a problem, we should revert back to people of authority, to the highest spheres that are qualified to regulate things, because they know the worldly interests and details, and also the religious ones. And for the religious field, we have scholars who are specialized, and only people who are specialized in the field can know the right interpretation. So Harun focused very much on the change that can stem from the heart and from the tongue. So this is just a reminder for people who should contemplate about those words. So the consolidation of peace is really wished for, and each one should take it into consideration. In Islam, we can only have faith with purity. So any hate speech have no place in our lives, because the extremism can only undermine our language of peace with which we are living. And this is why compassion, mercy, and jurisprudence specialists, you all have on your shoulders the responsibility to help your brothers and sisters in order to find the right way and to avoid being astray. So allow me to thank this conference, because it saves Africa from this thorny issue. And thank you very much. These were the contents of a poem by the end. Thank you very much, Excellency. And now I give the floor to His Eminence Shoran Abbasu, Vice President of the Management of Religious Affairs in Russia, for Muslims in particular. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and Allah be praised, and peace be on His Prophet Muhammad and his family and companions all together. Excellency, Minister of Religious and Islamic Affairs in Mauritania, Dr. Sayyidi Yahya Marabat, Excellencies and Eminence, it's with great pleasure that I'm extending to you all thanks and gratitude for the warm welcome and for allowing me to take part to this conference. here in this blessed land, Mauritania. And on behalf of our body in the Federal Republic of Russia, and on behalf of the Islamic community of Russia that reached 25 million Muslims, and on behalf of His Eminence, the General Mufti Rao Ainuddin, the head of the religious Department of Affairs, and on behalf of myself as well, I'm greeting you a greeting of love and concordance. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So the theme of peace consolidation is among the issues that have an important or a particular place, because we need to rally the views among so many different people and ensure coexistence on the basis of mutual respect. And in its own turn, this can pave the way for consolidating the societal tissue and harmony between citizens, and this has a pivotal role in ensuring the development of the country and also establishing constructive relations and beneficial ones among individuals and peoples. So our religious department in Federal Republic of Russia, through its activities and initiatives, and within the framework of so many fora and international conferences and also competitions of Quran recitation, and also in order to just to showcase the strength of Islam and also its rightful values, and to avoid and fight all the causes of conflicts and bring closer nations and consolidate dialogue among religions and faiths, and ensure peace between the components of a humane society. The religious Islamic Russian organizations showcased their readiness in order to organize its efforts with its partners in Africa, because the Russian society, first of all, has made a progress with great strides concerning extremism and terrorism. Second, Russia has a large experience and a unique one in terms of peaceful coexistence between ethnicities and religions and faiths. And on the basis of this, the interaction between African Muslim societies and Russia will have a great impact in order to face the terrorist challenges in its several forms, and also to consolidate peace in those societies. And our religious department is totally ready to increase cooperation through the use of international advocacy that is well known. So, widening the scope of cooperation on the basis of historical ties, and also increasing the number of visits between the Russian leadership and the African leadership, reflects the common will of diversifying international relations, and also in this world order that is multipolar, also with the aim of protecting our families and solid societies. Allow me to thank you again for this very kind invitation and for following. And I implore the Almighty to enable us to serve the Islam and also to serve our nations and the Arab and Islamic nations, and also to serve the human principles East and West under the banner of peace, brotherhood in the vast land that is the Lord's own, and also to unify our efforts and Allah is totally capable of this, and thank you for everything. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much, Eminence Roshan Abbasu, Vice President of the Department of Religious Affairs. Now we give the floor to Pekka Haavisto, the former and also Deputy Parliamentarian from Finland. You have the floor. You have the floor.
Chair, and if you allow, I will have my contribution in English. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Best greetings for everyone from Finland, a Nordic country, which in this time of year is covered with snow and ice. But as all of you, we have also warm hearts. Let me first congratulate the organizers and the government of Mauritania for bringing together such a prominent group of peacemakers here to Nouakchott, Mauritania, to this African Peace Conference. It's a great honor as a former Finnish Minister for Foreign Affairs and former European Union representative for Sudan and Darfur to be invited to this important event. I'm here with Mr. Jan Wahlberg, our Ambassador for Peace Mediation from the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs. When we are thinking of peace processes in the world and the role of religions, we have to recognize that religions should be part of the answer when we are building sustainable peace. Therefore, Finland has been highly evaluating and supported the network of religious and traditional peacemakers. I also want to recognize the presence of my good colleague, Executive Director of this network, Mr. Mohamed El Sanoussi, in this room. For those who do not yet know the network, it strengthens peacemaking through collaboratively supporting the positive role of religious and traditional actors in peace and peace-building processes. The network fosters collaboration among various actors who have diverse abilities yet shared goals, and it does so across multiple tracks from the local level to the global. The network uses networking, capacity building, research and advocacy to engage and uplift both religious and traditional actors from the local to the global levels. For my country, Finland, peace building traditionally plays an important role in its self-perception and also is a relevant component of our foreign policy orientation. I'm not only speaking of the role of the Finnish government, but also referring to the active role of the civil society that can have in peace building and mediation. In Finland, Helsinki, we are every second year organizing a big event representing successful national dialogues in different parts of the world, and the organizers include also key civil society players in the field of peace building, organizations like Martti Ahtisaari's Peace Foundation, CMI, Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Mission FELM, and Finn Church Aid, FCA, which is working closely with the network for religious and traditional peacemakers. Also in the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs, we have established our own Center for Peace Mediation in an effort to institutionalize the support for peace mediation also in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Many conflicts in the international arena also have a distinct cultural or religious component. The reason why seeking to address them justifies reflecting on the inclusion of faith-based actors who have the potential for both being either conflict drivers and spoilers or increase conflict and tensions or being peacemakers. Faith-oriented mediation has been complementing the world of peace building with a relevant dimension by adding a constructive layer to peacemaking efforts. There is a sustained potential role for faith-based and traditional peacemakers to contribute to conflict prevention, resolution and transformation efforts, as well as to improving social cohesion in post-conflict settings. While much effort has been placed on engaging religious actors, we have seen time and time again that peace mediation processes are most effective when adopting a whole-of-society approach. This includes the engagement of women, youth, religious and traditional actors, among others, and leads to a localization of mediation and questions like what does our own society need for the process to be successful. Religion has to be part of the solution. In all continents, there are people of faith who have chosen the path of peace, respect and coexistence. not in spite of their faith, but because of their faith. I also want to underline two groups that can particularly contribute to the peace, and I'm speaking about women and about youth. There are two important UN resolutions, 1325, Women, Peace and Security, and 2250, Youth, Peace and Security, which Finland has been strongly supporting and implementing. We have also been organizing peace efforts together with African youth and African women. Let me finish with a story of our visit together with Mr. Sanusi to Central African Republic CAR some years ago. One of our visits was to a small, mainly Christian village, which proudly wanted to show that in their neighborhood was living also a Muslim family. Only one, but a Muslim family. Of course, we visited also that house. I asked the husband if everything is all right now after the conflict. He said, yes, everything is fine. I have only stopped praying. I asked, why have you stopped praying? Have you lost your trust or confidence to the God? And he said, no, he still believes to God, but his neighbors do not like to see him praying. So we understood, even if there was peace, the tolerance has not yet arrived to the village. When speaking about peace, it's not completed if harmony and tolerance is not there. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, shukran, shukran.
Thank you very much, Excellency Fika Heinsto, for these beautiful words. And this is how we come to terms to this session of official speeches and addresses. After that, we'll have a scientific session. It will be the first one concerning the current situation in Africa. It will be brief because a few participants are just absent, so it will be brief. We will resume in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
السلام عليكم ورحمة.
We are going to start the last session. Kindly walk in the room and be seated, please. In the name of Allah, welcome anew. We are going to continue our conference to promote peace in Africa with under the title that you know, reconciliations and dialogue. After the first scientific session, the current situation in Africa and the need of dialogue, we will start with Mr. Mulay Hassan Awreed. You have the floor, sir. In the name of Allah, the merciful, the grateful, prayers on our Prophet, his kin and his ship. First of all, I would like to express my joy for being here amongst you in the country of the Almoravids, who carried the idea, an idea that they spread nationwide and put an end to disruption and built a state based on union and extended it to the southern part of Spain, the Andalusia. And I also am proud to be in this beautiful country, this country which is more than a country, it's an idea where different rights, different tribes are united in a special way, carrying values of Islam of peace, Islam of mediation. I am delighted to be here with you because this country is the yoking factor between Africa and the southern part of Africa, if I may say, between the Arab world and Africa. Allow me, let me share with you a story whose source is this country. You may know it, but no harm in repeating it in front of you. That was in the 19th century when a boat went shipwreck close to Nouadhibou, and that ship was of American pavilion, and some of its crew went to the land of Shangit, and they were welcomed by the people, and they kept them as guests for more than 10 years. And then came one tradesman from Marrakesh, and then he took those Americans with him to Essaouira, and they became Muslims. And now I handed them to the Council of Britain and the United States, and they were sent from Tangier to the United States. This American was named Holland, wrote his memories and talked about the generosity, the hospitality, the wonderfulness of these people when he wrote a book that was widespread. And Abraham read that book, and as soon as he read it, when he became a president of the United States, the first thing he did was to decide to put an end to slavery. This is something that anybody can be proud of when you share our values, and this land should be proud of it as well. I would like and talk to you about the changes that the international scene is witnessing and that could impact Africa. And it is a must on Africa today to take advantage of this situation so that it can position itself and make its voice heard, so that it could be impactful rather than impacted. And as Victor Hugo says rightly, it's high time the idea be implemented. The truth is that Africa was a topic, a subject, and not an important factor. So it must be our duty to read the changes that the world is witnessing and take advantage of these changes and opportunities that can be a plus, an added value to Africa, because Africa is living a paradox, the paradox of being the richest continent, but poor. So we need to put an end to this paradox in view of the potential that the continent has and the fact about what is available to its people. What we are talking about has been already talked about 2 decades or 2 generations ago, since Africa decolonized, and our leaders talked about the Union of Africa. As we say, Africa needs or must unite, and in the studies that were made by Anta Diop, Sheikh Anta Diop, in his books, and he showed clearly that Africa was not a barren land, but was rich in civilization, or what the historian from Burkinabe wrote, that Africa is one thing and the north of Africa is something else. And you know, we can also look into the Ali Mazroui's works, especially in the Arab-African cooperation. So what we need is to put these ideas in a new context, and to do so, we need to look at the development that Africa has witnessed since the decolonization period, and which was, Africa, as I said, was a topic or a subject rather than an actor. There is a book that we must have all read, and which gave a dark image about Africa. And the title of that book is Africa Has Taken the Wrong Start, ou L'Afrique est mal partie in French. So he said that Africa did not succeed after they got rid of the colonization. And of course, that was because of the colonization, and of course, because of the Cold War at the time. And that had a negative impact. And for that reason, African countries took the wrong decision, either the one-party system or other. And when the fall of Berlin Wall came, again, Africa was not an actor, but again, once again, a subject rather than an actor. So a lot of countries started looking for democracy, and there has been elections, but that development was not an easy one. It was tumultuous in many countries, even in those countries that were known as a model country like Cote d'Ivoire, which was at one time the scene of a civil war. There were also ethnic wars, civil wars, and it has become at one moment a field of experience for the different radical extremist groups that have taken advantage of the weakness of the state to take advantage of that void and use space where the state was absent. The case in point is Sahel. Radicalism has become a cancer conquering the countries, and despite all the efforts deployed by many foreign countries, the radicalism could not be removed because the approach was not the right one. And radicalism was feeding on local issues. And here I want to mention something about this period between the fall of the Wall of Berlin until today. We can say that Africa has witnessed, despite all what strategists have called the attractiveness or gravity. That is to say, it has been attracted to people, to countries, for its minerals, for its natural resources. By way of instance, China, France, both countries are in need of natural resources, or Russia, the three. Despite all the problems that Africa was living, it was attractive to Chinese, Russians, and French. And we can say that Africa, despite social, the political problems, has managed to walk into the globalization, as we call it, through two tools, the mobile phone and the internet. As much as Africa was disconnected from the world, all of a sudden Africa is with the highest penetration of phone, mobile phone and internet. We are in a third era where the actors have exchanged places. So it is up to those who work on ideas to try to solve this paradox of the richest country and the poorest people at the same time. I'm talking here about natural resources, agricultural products, but above all, the youth that can become, through a good vision, a source of wealth rather than a burden on their respective societies. All these positive elements can be changed to something positive if we have a good vision. Otherwise, they could be sources of conflicts and disputes. They could be a lever of development through a good vision. And this youth can what could lead to something positive. The first thing is reconciliation. There is no way we can move forward unless there is inner reconciliation. There has to be mechanisms to put an end to the, or what we call a social contract. So it's up to those who work on, and they need to look into the African deeply rooted culture. It should be the source, its own source of inspiration. We are not going to use Lewis Valley, that is, talk about the sovereignty and the state. We need to go beyond what happened in Europe, because we are not Europe. So even Europe has went beyond the Westphalia's model through the European Union. So reconciliation, a social pact or compact is important, without which no development, no reform can happen in this continent. So difference should not become the cause of disputes. We need to come up with mechanism to manage the difference. Second, unlockedness. We need to make sure people are no longer landlocked here and there. Roads, railways. There are many areas that are rich but cannot sell their product, cannot see investments because of their landlockedness, because of the situation where they are. African countries need to work on structural projects by deploying more and more state efforts, by working on structuring projects that could benefit everybody. Allow me to quote something that happened, through which a country with to face and look at this, namely China, through the Silk Road. So I think that we need to go back to what is known as the Gold Road. Remember the caravans that used to cross the deserts of Africa through the gold trade, salt and other commodities. I would be happy if this idea of the Gold Road could ring a bell in some of our leaders' ears. As I said, we need to use the Silk Road as an inspiration for our Gold Road, to tie the African parts of this continent. Last but not least, there is nothing great that can happen unless the whole society is involved. It shouldn't be the ideas of an elite. It should be the idea of the youth, of the mothers, of the fathers. And we know for a fact that we have problems traveling and moving within our even continent. We need to invest in our youth. We need to build bridges so that Africa becomes a source of abundance rather than a burden on others. To close, as some of the thinkers said, we need to look at all cases, even those who are disturbing. There are people who say that the relationship between the north of Africa and the south of the desert were not good. These are things we have to look into. And there are many people who try to make this relationship bad. But we should be courageous enough to talk about our problems, to make Africa step forward, to become an actor rather than a subject. And as we say, الرجوع إلى الأصل فضيلة. And I hope that this forum can be a bridge to get there, to come up with the best ideas, and thank you very much.
شكرا للدكتور مولاي حسن.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moulay Hassan Aourid, for this address that combined historical facts and also narrative, a narrative that is so interesting, and political analysis, and also political forecast and geostrategy. So these are things just usual for Hassan Aourid. He's a thinker and a specialist in political science, and he's also a writer. So we do thank him for this. And the second address under the title, Roadmap of Violence in the African Continent, Analysis and Monitoring, presented by Dr. Ghada Fouad. And she's a researcher and scholar in Egypt from the Center of Researches and Strategic Studies. You have 15 minutes. Good evening. I would like to thank the organizers of the conference, and I thank the Islamic Republic of Mauritania for the warm welcome, and allow me to thank the Center for Peace Conference, because Africa is in need of those encounters, because we are at the crossroads and we need to ensure a transition from conflict and violence to a phase of peace, because development cannot occur without peace. And I have a paper in which I studied violence in Africa, and the main findings is that even the definition of violence has changed over time. So there is no consensus on the physical violence as the unique and sole aspect of violence, and even for a political, religious purpose. And now we can talk about an exhaustive definition that includes so many features of violence in order to understand its impact. And now in the African continent, if we want to measure it, we will find out that we have direct and indirect violence. Direct violence, of course, are those who die because of landmines and also explosions that affects directly those bodies because of neglect. Also, this can be inviolent and being impacted by economic and social conditions, and also by the neglect of the rulers. This is indirect violence. And indeed, if we want to elucidate the situation, we have centers that detect violence all over the world. And we found out that in Africa during 2024, up to 15 December 2024, 2004, we had 20 countries in the African continent that witnessed acts of violence, and we have extreme cases of violence, and we have a few economic or political turbulences. So we have different kinds. We can be talking about ethnic violence, that is tribal, and linguistic violence, economic, social, and armed conflict, of course. And we have violence against the freedom of expression, and we have inter-country violence, and also among factions. And what we noticed in 2024 is violence against women at all levels, even in societies that do not witness armed conflicts. The rate of violence against women increased incrementally, and the other kind of violence is against immigrants and foreigners who are working in African countries and that have been displaced because of conflicts and tensions, or because of the migrants who left their countries because of economic conditions, and they are seeking new opportunities in Africa. This situation was not prevalent before several years, but now it is increasing, especially in 2024. This is what we noticed. So when we want to try to study the reasons for violence, well, unlike the spread of terrorism and extremism and radicalism, we can find this kind of violence in West, East, and also the center of Africa. And at the beginning, or before a few days, we noticed what happened in Benin, and we had several casualties. And we have violence because of rebels, armed groups, and we have radical groups like Shabab Muslimin and Boko Haram in Nigeria that's expanded in Western Africa, and we have so many armed groups and extremists and separatist movements. Why are we witnessing this now? Can we just give it back to external parties, or how can we just think about the root causes for those violence? Because sometimes it starts with an idea that becomes a behavior, and then we have casualties that result from it. Indeed, we have multiple reasons, but the most important of which, and we can say generally, that it impacts so many African countries, we have the fake democracy. What do we mean by fake democracy? We say that so many African countries, they do practice democracy, but it is just cosmetic. It has nothing to do with the heart of democracy. I have a democratic regime. I need to have a multi-party system. I need to have, but this does not happen in several countries, African countries, because we know how elections are being held. But when we see reality, we find so many unconstitutional changes during the mandates of presidency, and we see how presidents can just prolong and keep extending their mandate. And also for the political sphere, we see so many misdeeds, and even the young are being exploited in political parties, and this is what drives them to embrace violence. We do not have a political education. We have political ignorance. We have apolitical people, but we need to teach our children how to have their rights in a peaceful way. It doesn't matter who is ruling the country if we want to talk about these things with a more clear vision. For example, when I was coming to this conference, I was discussing with a colleague, and I said, "Why are we different?" He said that if a person from a tribe wins, all the positions will be monopolized by the members of this tribe. But if we apply transparency, the principle of transparency and competency, there will be no violence, even if a political party wins. The second point that is interrelated with the first one is the decrease in terms of levels of education. If we have societies that are not well educated, they cannot go far. But on the contrary, if we educate them, we'll have the dialogue culture. And we have Lord Henry Burkham in England. He said that education can make people very easily leaders, but it will be very difficult to lead them. So if you want to eradicate violence in the African continent, we need to invest in education. But the question is, what kind of education? We need an education that will consolidate the culture of tolerance, but at the same time, an education that will generate jobs. And because we have so many courses that are solely based on the theoretical tenets, and I can have a graduate who is unable to integrate the job market, and also that can help the country to develop. And this way, this person will just remain unemployed. If the country has so many gold resources or oil resources, this person will be unable to exploit them. And this is why another person who will come from abroad and he will exploit those resources. And this is why so many African countries just remain in their place without moving ahead. And this is why having a compatible system of education with the resources will be most convenient, and those people will not fall prey for extremist and radicalist groups. Another point that was a reason for violence dissemination is the high rate of corruption. For 2022-2023, there was an indicator of corruption, and we noticed at the level of 180 countries, and Africa had the lowest levels of this index in terms of government corruption, and the scale is from 0 to 100, and 100 means that there is no corruption at the level of corruption in Africa. And in sub-Saharan Africa, the result was 33%. Now, the spread of corruption, this gives a fertile ground for weak leadership, political leadership. Can we just launch good programs? No, because this personality or this person is just weak, and the choice of the cooperators and collaborators will be weak, and then citizens will not be served, because people who are counting on governmental services are the most vulnerable, and this will just cause disorders at the level of society, and this will be just riots and rebellious movements against the country. And there is another point that is equally important, and the Western and Central African countries now pay attention to this. We have a lack of economic, and South Sudan witnessed 4 floods, successive floods, and they were during the season of harvest or sowing. Accordingly, we need to increase the programs of climate change, because this will decrease tensions, because when we have negative ramifications of climate change, there is displacement of population, and this increases tension between the incoming waves and those who are settlers since a long time ago. And during the last 4 years, the international powers and the great powers have been competing over Africa, and this is one more reason for the spread of the radicalist or extremist movements. Are there solutions? Yes, of course we have solutions, but we need to work hand in hand in order to face the economic sanctions that are being imposed in case of any political change in those countries that is not compliant with the expectations of international powers, because the party that is being punished is the people and not the regime, and we need to have intercomplementary programs among countries, and this is very important in the Great Lakes, especially war was waged again, and so many other conflicts because of competition over resources or the will to exploit resources by a neighboring country. And if we have programs that are intercomplementary and that involve several countries, this will create a need, and then countries will try to cooperate instead of compete. And also we need to respect the traditional culture, because Africa is mushrooming with those cultures, and we need to revive them, and we need to go back to the African tradition and identity. We need to go back to the deep roots, and also to teach the children of this African culture that is spreading tolerance. We are trying to provide practical solutions, and we can also launch programs on TikTok and Telegram and have campaigns at the level of schools in which we bridge the gap between grandparents and children. And this way we can teach children, because given the financial crisis and the economic crisis, people have no longer time to sit together with the children, to be around the table. We need to recreate the culture of those children. And there is another important issue in Africa. We have so many Sufi movements, and all people who adhere to this thought. We need to revive it in the rightful way, because this is a very important factor in tolerance dissemination in the African continent. Equally important, we need to launch sensitiveness campaign against killing women. And we have Kenya, for example. They are killing just for the sake of killing, and this is a systematic torture of the victim. And when I was talking to one of the men in the African countries, they said we need programs of raising awareness for males as well, and not only to women, because we do marry in a very early age, and we do not even know what is our responsibility concerning women and children. If I have a child, for example, and I cannot bear the responsibility of the schooling of the child, I will just abandon the child to the street, and then the street will take over. And so this is why if I do not have the resources to fund for my children and family, I will be just facing a real problem, and this is a real necessity. I heard young people from 10 separate respective countries. We need vocational training for young people to have jobs, even those who are specialized in religious teachings. We need to rehabilitate them and to give them vocational training, to make them predisposed to integrate the job market, and to have them integrate jobs that are compatible with the resources of those countries. I will not speak any longer, and they're showing and telling me that I have only 5 minutes length. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor, for this speech and contribution in which you analyzed the roadmap in Africa. She tried to suggest a few solutions that can be most convenient to us. Now, let's welcome Farid Al-Basha, Dean of Mohammed V University in Rabat, and we give him back the floor, and we welcome him, and he will be chairing this session and moderating it. Thank you. I beg your pardon, I joined lately. I was impeded by a few commitments, and allow me to thank the conference for this invitation. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to the last speaker. Under the title, The Current Situation in the African Continent. This is by the delegate Muhammad Abdullah Al-Abidi, and a regional one, and also he worked in national security. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I am delighted to be with this group of eminent researchers. I know Mr. Awreed when I was a student at the university in Morocco, and I also met him when I was a student at the university. I would speak in French. I'm going to talk about the recent developments of the terrorist threats in Mauritania and the sub-region. And I want to share with you the Mauritanian approach, because Mauritania has proven to be an exception in the region, actually. This is the outline of my presentation. First of all, as the speakers before me said, the world as we know it today has what we call multi-dimensional crises. Then I will talk about the sub-regional context and the Mauritanian strategy and the prospects that as we are looking at them today don't look positive, unfortunately. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, the world context, we have a multidimensional crisis, both strategic and geopolitical, and these two are connected and exasperated by more interest conflicts between the different world actors. And among the key aspects that we see, that's the war in Ukraine and its negative economic impacts. So Russia now is backed up by China and Iran, while Russia has the NATO. Now we have another element, which is what is known as the hybrid war, which uses every tool available other than the military. Cyber attacks, by way of instance. And among the examples I can mention is what happened in the Middle East. Today there is a change in the area, be it Lebanon or Syria. Again, you have strategic rivalry in the war of the China Sea. Remember, one of the speakers talked about the Silk Road, and what's happening today is that the others are trying to stop that road of the Silk Road because of the Taiwan war. Because for the Western world, China is bent on recovering this piece of land in 2027. So we are talking about the sub-region again, which is the topic here. This is an area that is close to the Americas, that is close to Europe, the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Next slide, please. In the Sahel, we have military strategies now. Today we have major and minor actors. Today some states like Iran and Turkey are important actors. I would say that the strategic dimension can be seen in many aspects. You have the military aspects, and you know that military aspects can have economic and diplomatic repercussions. And you know that what is happening in this region is that many big actors are trying to implant themselves in the region. Turkey, China. Of course, these conflicts have social, economic, and political impacts. Local economies today are in bad shape. Food shortage, ethnic problems, social instability, and crises worldwide. Next slide, please. Now, how do these crises manifest themselves? Well, you have the terrorist attacks. There are some states who cannot have access to the certain areas, and we have the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda in the sub-region that has declared its allegiance to Al-Qaeda. As somebody said earlier, we are witnessing today an extension of the terrorist threat in the Gulf of Guinea. Remember the attack in Benin, and this threat is also to be found in Togo, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, so it's clear today that the different terrorist groups have used the Gulf of Guinea, of the Chad, their center points of attacks. Next slide. From my standpoint, the problem in the sub-region, we have what is the Sahel said is more than 1/4 of the African continent. 10 million square kilometers. What are the aspects of these crises? You have the social disruption, lack of sovereignty over the whole territory, problem of governance. There is a tie between organized crime and narcotics, and it has become a zone of predilection that is good and prosperous for terrorist groups. And narco-terrorists today is what finances organized crime. Today we have the human trafficking that helps the groups make a lot of money and finance terrorism. So how to solve this? How are things evolving? Millions and millions of displaced people, break up in the food chain. Food security is threatened. Lack of security, more vulnerability. And once you are vulnerable, you are very much subject to violence. You have also refugees moving from one country to another. We have today in Mauritania 300,000 people from Mauritania displaced who are here, who are not considered refugees. And there are thousands and thousands of people who are here just looking for a better life. And that gives a problem of insecurity at the borders, because people are no longer safe at home. Sometimes people no longer trust the authorities that are there supposedly to protect them. Next slide, please. This is what I have talked about: exasperation of ethnic conflict, use of new technologies. You know, terrorists have their own communication means, have their own drones, and very much active in the social media. We talked about how Chad has become also a field of terrorism today. Unfortunately, today we are witnessing internal conflicts which can lead to genocide sometimes.
There is no schooling because the terrorist groups impede the education of children. Let alone the displacement of the population that affects economy, health, and the education of children. Next slide, please. So, unfortunately, this situation that is not really comfortable brings me to talk about the strategy of Mauritania that is quite interesting. This is Mr. Hassan talked about the position of Mauritania. It is very important on the geopolitical plan. This is at the crossroads of maritime and Saharan, and it is at the crossroad with Canary Islands, Nouadhibou, and Americas, and then Africa. So it is really a passage to several destinations, and Mauritania is the last border of the Sahel. And we all know that the Sahel region is the Atlantic and extends from the Atlantic to the Red Sea. And Mauritania was among the first countries to have been subject to terrorist attacks. and taking into consideration its cultural background, because Mauritania is a Saharan country, and the real problem started in the Sahara region, and we do understand the nature of threat, and we need to find the right solutions. And the objective is to mitigate this threat and to make Mauritania immune from those threats. And we had some success in the region in this regard. Next slide, please. So now, in brief, the Mauritanian strategy, it is based on two pillars. There is an aspect that is quite soft, and the other one is hard. So the first one is prevention, intelligence, and the implementation of administrative entities, and being close to citizens and the governance, and through a participatory approach, organized dialogue with the different political actors. All these are important elements that will allow us to that the relevant stakeholders for ruling the country in terms of the opposition and also the majority to have a consultative approach to exchange and communicate and achieve a consensus, as Hassan talked about cooperation, at least for the basics, and we need to come to an agreement in terms of ideologies, and we need to fight violent extremism. And this is very important because today there is a refusal of so many approaches, but we need them in Mahdara and schools, and we need the fight against vulnerability and exclusion, and Mr. Ghazwani mentioned this, and in schooling today there is one fundamental school, public school, so people just study together and they are together, and we are also the population for the most vulnerable. We have studies and help. There is a monthly help, and this is quite important, and also health and schooling services are for free. And there was a system that was created in order to allow taking advantage from activities that can generate income, especially for the youth who were involved in terrorist activities. And we held so many encounters within the framework of the fight against violent extremism, and we had very promising results because more than 90% of people who were rehabilitated never fell back between the pawn of terrorism. So we'll continue, we'll resume. So this is the plan, the institutional plan for money laundering and terrorism financing. We have so many structures that will allow us to prevent branches from financing extremism, and also organized crime will be prevented. Further, please. And this is very important. As far as I'm concerned, we need to have a structure dedicated to national extremism at the judicial level. In Mauritania today we have one single judicial pole that knows all the aspects of those files, and also we need to have a synergy among all the involved stakeholders. So we have a judicial police, and we also have another structure that is taking care of all that is pertaining to justice and court. Please, next slide. So the second approach that seemed to me today can be placed in second priority So we cannot just settle disputes and find solutions through the hard approach, the hard way. So the right solutions to the right problems, so we can have a symmetrical in the north and south of the continent. And today we need to have a strategy, national and the Pan-African strategy of cooperation and exchange that will allow all the countries to know if the threat is global and if they require a global response. And thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for this speech that started with the presentation of the state of affairs and the multidimensional crisis and the numerous conflicts that the world witnessed, and also the repercussions of those conflicts on Africa and also on the Sahel region. And you mentioned the Mauritanian strategy in this regard. It was preventive and also through a social contract that was already raised by Mr. Awrid, and through an institutional system, legal and illegal, by through the support of all the institutions, so in the framework of a cooperation and exchange strategy. And we come to the end of this session, and we renew our meeting tomorrow morning. And thank you very much.